Does prom king count in the same way that being king of Israel counted? I say yes. What follows are my initial thoughts and reactions to this book of the Bible. I have not done any outside research regarding the more challenging or problematic passages of Christian scripture. Therefore, do not take whatever criticisms I may make in this video as my final word on the passage or verse in question. I am very likely going to be doing a Bible Revisited series addressing my different issues with the Bible, book by book, after conducting ample outside research. So now, without further ado, let's jump into the review. So 1 Kings is a book in the Old Testament of the Bible, and it was written, we don't exactly know by who, but possibly Jeremiah, or a group of the prophets from that time. And it is kind of basically an overview of a whole bunch of the different kings of Israel, and whether or not they lived their lives according to God, or lived according to their own ways and to other gods. I mean, some of the really big characters in the book that I really find worth talking about, like Solomon, we're going to talk about him a whole lot, because Solomon is a very complex character. I don't fully know how to feel about him, but he clearly, when you read 1 Kings, you clearly walk away going, well, Solomon definitely was not a perfect man, but he was a wise guy in some ways, for sure. Not like wise guy as in gangster, but like as in my granddad. Although I guess Solomon was kind of a little bit of a gangster. I mean, when he first rises to power, he like kills everyone that kind of disagreed with him in the past. Elijah? Oh. There's one story in particular which we're going to talk about involving him that is, it's like it would be an awesome scene in a movie. But yeah, my overall thoughts on 1 Kings is I thought it was a really, really interesting and compelling book. There definitely are some parts of 1 Kings that, I found problematic for the character of God. Like, I don't understand why he punished certain people for the things that they did. It didn't seem right according to what God has taught in the Bible. And so we're going to talk about those passages here in a second. But overall, 1 Kings, I was a fan. All right, so now let's go ahead and jump into the various passages and verses in the book of 1 Kings that I found particularly compelling, interesting, or problematic, or all three of those things. So if you've read 1 Kings, and perhaps you have, or if you haven't, you should. As you know, Solomon inherits the throne from David. David gives it on to Solomon. And while Solomon, I don't believe he was not the firstborn, it wasn't actually intended for him, but David gave it to him anyways, and that causes a schism, as you know, between Solomon and his brother. He gives the kingship to Solomon because he believes Solomon is, more fit for it. I mentioned just a second ago, Solomon, whenever he's a complex character, because when he first comes to power, he does some things that I'm like, ooh, Solomon, did you really need to kill those people? Like, what? But then after Solomon does that kind of brutal stuff, then all of a sudden Solomon becomes like very, very wise in a lot of ways. At least for a little while. And the first passage I would like to read concerning Solomon's wisdom is 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 7 to 14. And this is Solomon speaking. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. But I am only a little child, and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment and administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both riches and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in my ways and obey my statutes and commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life. The reason I wanted to point that passage out is one of the qualities that I find very interesting about Solomon, and this passage and a couple other passages is his selflessness. He's praying to God basically for wisdom on how to help his people, how to govern his people, how to do what is right for his people. It's not him saying, God, make me greater than all the other kings. God, make me wealthy and rich and more powerful than all other rulers before me. He's not saying that. And I like that God rewards him for not saying this. And God, because he didn't say this, is like, well, you're going to get all those things anyways. Because you prayed for the right thing. You prayed for wisdom on how to, do justice. And I just find that, so often whenever people pray, I find myself doing this, we pray for selfish reasons. God, please help for me to get that job. God, please help for me to get straight A's. Or God, please help for, me to be significant or something. Here, Solomon does the opposite. He's like, God, just use me to help my people in the best way possible. And I find that very striking and significant and admirable about Solomon's character. The next passage I would like to talk about regarding Solomon is just a couple verses after the last passage we just discussed. And this passage is 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 to 28. This story, it's shocking, but like Solomon, it's one of those things you're like, oh, so I see why people say Solomon, he's wise, he knew, he does something here that's it's clever. It's a clever way to find out the truth. And it's one of my favorite stories in this book. So without further ado, let's read and discuss it. Now 2 prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. One of them said, "My lord, this woman and I live in the same house. I had a baby while she was there with me. The 3rd day after my child was born, this woman also had a baby. We were alone. There was no one in the house but the 2 of us. During the night, this woman's son died because she lay on him. So she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from my side, while I, your servant, was asleep. She put him by her breast and put her dead son by my breast. The next morning I got up to nurse my son, and he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning light, I saw that it wasn't the son I had born." The other woman said, "No, the living one is my son, the dead one is yours." But the first one insisted, "No, the dead one is yours, the living one is mine." And so they argued before the king. The king said, "This one says, my son is alive and your son is dead, while that one says, no, your son is dead and mine is alive." Then the king said, "Bring me a sword." So they brought a sword for the king. He then gave an order, "Cut the living child in 2 and give half to one and half to the other." The woman whose son was alive was filled with compassion for her son and said to the king, "Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him." But the other said, "Neither I nor you shall have him. Cut him in 2. Then the king gave his ruling, "Give the living baby to the first woman. Do not kill him. She is his mother." When all Israel heard the verdict the king had given, they held the king in awe, because they saw that he had wisdom from God to administer justice. Like, is that story not like the coolest story? I mean, the way he discovers the truth is by basically saying, I'm going to cut a baby in half. And of course, the person who's really the mother in the situation is like, she does her best to save her child's life by saying, "Hey, no, give my son to the other woman. Whatever you do, just don't kill him." And Solomon sees that and is like, "Well, then you are the mother." And the other person's like, "Yeah, cut him in 2." But obviously that woman's not the mother, because no mother in her right mind would say, "Neither I nor you shall have the child." So Solomon was able to figure out that the first woman was the mother because of her protective instinct and willingness to give away her child for the sake of the child's life. It's a really beautiful story, very powerful, and it's an example of Solomon being kind of freaking awesome. Now, the next passage I would like to discuss is much too long to read, but I will talk about it. There is a prayer that Solomon has in 1 Kings. This is 1 Kings chapter 8, verses 22 to 61. This prayer, I'm not, you read it yourself, assuming that you're watching this review, you've made it this far, you've probably already read it, but I can encourage you to read it again because it really It's an example, again, of Solomon's selflessness for his people. And he's basically praying to God and being like, God, I know everyone is a sinner. I know that we will betray you. I know that, we are beneath you. But God, have mercy on my people. Forgive us when we repent. Give us second chances. He was basically praying for his people. Not even really for himself. He was more just praying for his people and praying to God to have mercy on them because they're sinners, and without him, they all deserve to die. He was basically saying that in a whole lot more words than I just said, in a lot more beautiful way. I don't know, from that passage alone and the previous passage I mentioned regarding Solomon's selflessness, I'm going to think about that for a long time and try and emulate that character trait. Solomon's part of his downfall comes from his lust for women. I just have to read this because it's a crazy passage. This is chapter 11, 1 Kings, verses 1 to 3. Solomon, he puts Dan Bilzerian to shame. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter: Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods." Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. So I stand by my statement. Solomon put Dan Bilzerian to shame. Now, after all this, God is basically like, I'm going to punish you, Solomon. I'm going to take away your kingdom. You have betrayed me. That's basically the sentiment expressed. Now, the next passage I'm wanting to discuss is 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 11 to 13. I have an issue with the Old Testament regarding the punishment of sons for the sins of the fathers. It says in the Old Testament that this is a wrong thing, and yet over and over and over again, it seems as if sons are punished for the sins of their fathers, by God, mind you. It seems like a giant contradiction. It comes up several times. It comes up several times in 1 Kings alone. I only marked one instance of it because it would be redundant to bring up the other 3 times I think it happens in this book. But it would be dishonest of me to not bring up problematic passages like the one I'm about to read right now. So the Lord said to Solomon, "Since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David, my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen." Solomon is the one who betrayed God. And yet God is tearing the kingdom away from his son, who hasn't done anything wrong. I wrote here as a note, okay, it's punishing sons for the sins of the father, even if the punishment of the son is a punishment of the father. That's really what that is really saying. And I find it woefully problematic and contradictory and not right. Now, the next passage I would like to discuss that is, I find problematic, just kind of weird, and need some guidance on. Any wisdom out there, any other knowledge that people may have, please send it my way after I discuss my problems with this passage. But the passage is 1 Kings chapter 13, verses 7 to 32. This passage is where there is an old prophet in the land who comes across this man of God, and this man of God, they're both, okay, first of all, just so we don't get confused, the old prophet is referred to as the old prophet, and the man of God is only referred to as the man of God. So just act like those are names for the sake of me explaining it. This man of God has been told by God, you're supposed to fast completely. This old prophet, however, says, "I too am a prophet, as you are, and an angel said to me by the word of the Lord, bring him back with you to your house, so that he may eat bread and drink water." So the man of God returned with him and ate and drank in his house. Okay, this is all interesting so far. As you're reading this story, you're thinking, the old prophet the guy who lied to the man of God, he's going to get punished. That is not what happened, though. What happens is that God blames the man of God for disobeying him, for trusting this guy who claimed to be a prophet. The old prophet gets off scot-free, whereas the man of God gets eaten by a lion. I mean, he was lied to. I mean, what was he just supposed to know that this old prophet was, a liar? Was he just supposed to know that just from reading facial expressions, just from intuition? I think maybe we're supposed to believe that, but I just, it seems unjust. It seems not fair. It seems kind of insane. Say I was told by, my father, don't paint your room a different color. But my mother tells me, no, your father's okay with you painting your room a different color. And so I paint my room a different color. And then my dad comes in and is like, why did you paint your room a different color? I'd be like, well, mom said it was okay. And dad would be like, she lied. I'm not, according to this story, if we were going to, draw an analogy, according to this story, my dad wouldn't blame my mom for lying to me. He would blame me for disobeying him, even though I was lied to. It just doesn't make any sense. That's the point of what I'm trying to say. If anyone has an explanation for why it's not unjust, please leave your comments in the comment section below. Now, I spoke of Elijah earlier in this review. Elijah is such a cool character in this book. The story that I like, I'm not going to read the whole story because it's quite long, but the story that I find the most interesting with him is 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 16 to 46. So what I find so fascinating about this passage is, basically Elijah devises a challenge to see which God is real, Baal or the God of Israel. And Elijah's like, okay, so you guys set up like get 2 bulls, put some meat on your burnt offering. I believe it was like a burnt offering, an altar or whatever. Sets your bull on that, on some wood, and I'll set some on mine. And basically, we'll both pray to the sky and see which God answers. And the people who are believing in Baal, they dance around their altar, their burnt offering, and they pray to Baal, and nothing happens. Elijah ends up taunting them. He's like, shout louder, surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. He's mocking them because Baal is not answering them, because Baal is not real. And then what Elijah does, he says, come here to me. And all the people came to him. And he repaired the altar of the Lord, which was in ruins. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, your name shall be Israel. With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, fill 4 large jars with water, and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Do it again, he said, and they did it again. Do it a 3rd time, he ordered, and they did it a 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so that these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. So basically, God answers Elijah. Now, what I find also interesting about this passage is that whatever happens here, if this in fact happened, it's incredibly rare, because I know that people have, called on God before and nothing happens. I mean, to deny that fact is absurd. And so, if in fact the story of Elijah is true, what Elijah must have, he was on another level of faith and belief and spiritual awareness for God to answer him in this way. You can point to examples in the media of atheists mocking Christians for their faith in God. Why doesn't God answer your prayer? Why doesn't he do all this stuff? And they have a good point. And what's interesting is Elijah's taunting a different people's God in the same way. Also, one thing about this passage, I only read a small portion of the passage, but later on, like verses 41 to the end of the chapter, Elijah kneels down because he also is he's almost controlling the weather. There's a drought. There's no rain coming unless he says that it comes by the word of God. And so after this happens, he kneels down and he just tells this guy, go check the sky, go check the sky, go check the sky, see if there are clouds. And eventually clouds begin to form, and then there's a giant storm. It's just an amazingly well-written story that's fascinating. Now the next passage I would like to discuss is 1 Kings chapter 22, verses 14 to 28. But Micaiah, I don't know how to pronounce that, said, as surely as the Lord lives, I can tell him only what the Lord tells me. And by the way, he was just told that he was just told that he should lie before that. And Micaiah said, as surely as the Lord lives, I can tell him only what the Lord tells me. So it seems like he's not going to lie whenever he says that. When he arrived, the king asked him, Micaiah, shall we go to war against Ramoth Gilead, or shall I refrain? Attack and be victorious, he answered, for the Lord will give it into the king's hand. What's interesting also here is all the other people had been called to King Ahab about the war, had been saying, oh, you will be victorious and all this stuff. And then Micaiah had a reputation for saying, no, very bad things are going to happen. Now he's saying something good is going to happen. Now I think it's important to point out that he may have been being sarcastic in this verse. Whenever he says, attack and be victorious, he answered, for the Lord will give it into the king's hand. Because the king kind of responds like, you mocking me, dude? The king said to him, how many times must I make you swear to tell me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord? Then Micaiah answered, I saw all Israel scattered on the hills like sheep without a shepherd. And the Lord said, these people have no master. Let each one go home in peace. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, didn't I tell you that he never prophesies anything good about me, but only bad? Micaiah continued, therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne with all the host of heaven standing around him on his right and on his left. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab into attacking Ramoth Gilead and going to his death there? One suggested this and another that. Finally a spirit came forward, stood before the Lord, and said, I will entice him. By what means? The Lord asked. I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouths of all his prophets, he said. You will succeed in enticing him, said the Lord. Go and do it. So the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouths of all these prophets of yours. The Lord has decreed disaster for you. Then Zedekiah, son of Cananiah, went up and slapped Micaiah in the face. Which way did the spirit from the Lord go when he went from me to speak to you? He asked. Micaiah replied, you will find out on the day you go to hide in an inner room. The king of Israel then ordered, take Micaiah and send him back to Amnon, the ruler of the city, and to Joash the king's son, and say, this is what the king says. Put this fellow in prison and give him nothing but bread and water until I return safely. Micaiah declared, if you ever return safely, the Lord has not spoken through me. Then he added, mark my words, all you people. The real concerning part of this passage is verses 19 to 23, which is where it seems like Micaiah is saying that the Lord recruited an evil spirit to put lies into the mouths of all the prophets. I mean, what? That seems very wrong. It seems like God's working with the devil. I don't see how that's not a problem. Now, my Life Application Bible has some interesting applications, or some interesting thoughts, and I would like to read those thoughts, because maybe they're true, maybe they're not, but they certainly are interesting, and I think they're worthy of being brought up in this discussion. The vision Micaiah saw was either a picture of a real incident in heaven or a parable of what was happening on earth, illustrating that the seductive influence of the false prophets would be a part of God's judgment upon Ahab. Whether or not God sent an angel in disguise, he used the system of false prophets to snare Ahab into sin. The lying spirit symbolized the way of life of these prophets who told the king only what he wanted to hear. I don't know if I buy... See, this is an instance where people, 21st century, go back and look at the Bible and act like certain things are metaphors when there's not a whole lot of evidence that they are. You have to choose to believe that this is a parable. It doesn't say that it is explicitly a parable. It sounds like Micaiah is saying this is what happened. My Life Application Bible sounds like they're saying, this is, just a story to illustrate what's going on. It's fishy. That's my point. Now, another one of the notes that they have is they ask the question, does God allow angels to entice people to do evil? To understand evil, one must first understand God. One, God himself is good. They have a whole bunch of scriptures citing this. I don't care to read the parentheses, though. God created a good world. This is number 2. God created a good world that fell because of man's sin. 3, someday God will recreate the world and it will be good again. 4, God is stronger than evil. 5, God allows evil and thus he has control over it. God did not create evil, and he offers help to those who wish to overcome it. 6, God uses everything, both good and evil, for his good purposes. The Bible shows us a God who hates all evil and will one day do away with it completely and forever. God does not entice anyone to become evil. Those committed to evil, however, may be used by God to sin even more in order to hurry their deserved punishment. We don't need to understand every detail of how God works in order to have perfect confidence in his absolute power over evil and his total goodness toward us. See, here's the thing about that passage. It's almost like it's saying that God is using evil for his purposes, which seems questionable, right? Now, I understand that God may use evil people and that sort of thing, but him enlisting an evil spirit to basically seduce someone into doing something that they otherwise would not do, it seems contradictory to me as far as God's care. I mean, it seems wrong, because isn't Satan supposed to be the enemy, like the big bad guy? Well, why are you allowing his influence in your decision making, God? Like, that's a question. Look, maybe I'm out of my mind. Maybe I just am a moron who doesn't understand this passage. If I am, please, in the comment section below, tell me why. Please don't call me an idiot. I don't want to be called an idiot. But please tell me why I'm wrong. Because I would like to get to the bottom of this passage, because it doesn't make sense to me. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, those are my thoughts on 1 Kings. Again, I thought it was a fascinating book, a compelling book. You can get some real takeaways from the characters some really good moral takeaways from the characters of Solomon and Elijah and a couple of the other characters in the book. Definitely going to take the selfless attitude of Solomon and try and emulate that in my life, and also take Elijah's strength of faith and try to apply it in my life. But also, 1 Kings, there are problems in it, or things that I perceive to be problems that I can't ignore. And so, overall, the book mostly I found incredible and amazing. And, about 15% of it I found to be a little troubling. And that's okay. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, if you have read 1 Kings, please let me know whatever questions or comments you might have about 1 Kings. Please leave those questions and comments in the comment section below, and just, start a good discussion. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, if you like this video, please like it and subscribe. Tell your friends about the channel. And never forget to